Welcome and thank you for joining us today for Network Observability, Managing Performance Across Hybrid Networks. My name is Raleigh Gould and I'll be moderating today's event. Our featured speaker is Shamus McGillicuddy, VP of Research covering Network Infrastructure and Operations at EMA. Shamus has nearly 2 decades of experience in the IT industry. His research focuses on all aspects of managing enterprise networks, including network automation, AI ops-driven network operations, multi-cloud networking, and WAN transformation. And before I hand things over to Shamus, I wanted the audience to know that he will be concluding his event today by taking your questions. Feel free to log them anytime by using the Q&A functionality. Also, today's event is being recorded and you will receive a follow-up email with the on-demand playback as well as additional information regarding this new research report. So I hope you will check that email out. And now I'd like to go ahead and turn things over to our featured speaker, Shamus McGillicuddy. Shamus?
Thank you, Raleigh. This is a webinar highlighting recent findings from my ongoing research into network observability, which this year is subtitled Managing Performance Across Hybrid Networks, but because I think that hybrid networks are sort of driving the concept of network observability, why people are starting to think of their tools in terms of observability. Um, but I'll get into that more in a moment. Before I do that, I want to just highlight the sponsors of the research. This is independent market research by EMA, by me, um, that is financially supported by multiple vendors. So none of the vendors you see here, they've all sponsored it. Blue Cap, Broadcom, Juniper, NetScout, and Park Place Technologies. They all sponsored it, but they don't actually see the report before I publish it, and they don't actually see these slides before I present them to you. So, they're obviously sponsoring this because they are interested in the topic, they're interested in thought leadership opportunities, they're interested in the market insight they can get from the research because I do send them the data that I collect before I publish the research so they can see what people are saying. They get benefits out of it, but they don't control what's published. It's important to note. But anyway, thank you to those companies for making it possible for me to do this research. And what why did I do it? Why are we all here to talk about this? Um, Network observability emerged a few years ago as a marketing term that was used to describe tools that have traditionally been described in other ways over the last 25, 30 years. Network monitoring, network fault management, network performance monitoring, network performance management and diagnostics, which is an extension of the term above it, coined by Gartner for whatever reason they chose to do that. But they all kind of describe similar things. There's lots of Venn diagrams with multiple overlapping circles over all of that. And it came up this week on LinkedIn. I was posting about this research, and someone was like, well, network monitoring is about devices, and network performance management was about traffic. And I was like, not really. When I talk to people one-on-one and I tell them, like, could you just describe to me what you use to monitor, troubleshoot, and optimize your network? And they will give me a list of like 4 tools, 5 tools. They'll be like, wow, I got this tool that like pulls SNMP data from devices. I've got this tool that does net flow monitoring. I have this tool that maybe analyzes packets, and I use that definitely in the cloud because I want to understand the cloud more. And then I have this tool that generates synthetic traffic, and I actually have a second tool that generates synthetic traffic. So anyway, what is that all? Why is that all happening? Why do you have like so many tools and they're all monitoring, they're all performance management, they're all increasingly network observability? Um, Network vendors are clearly trying to communicate something to you when they call their tools network observability solutions, whereas 3 years ago or 5 years ago, they would have been calling it something else on this slide that you see. Why are they doing that? And what should you expect from them when you hear them talking about it? And even more important, like what should you demand from them when you start thinking about things in terms of observability instead of monitoring or performance monitoring or performance management and all that. So that's something that I've been doing over the last um, few years. I surveyed people in 2022, and now I'm surveying them again in 2024, end of 2024, publishing in beginning of 2025, um, about okay, we all know you got tools that you use to monitor, troubleshoot, and manage capacity optimization of your network. Cares what you call it. Let's just talk about it. Just tell me what you're using and how you're using it. But also, like, does the phrase network observability mean anything to you in a helpful way? And anyway, so I surveyed 351 people in the end of 2024. And early 2025, perhaps. Can't remember exactly when the survey was cut off. And we also talked to quite a few people one-on-one as well, and published this report that this webinar is based upon. And this is obviously a slide that shows you who we talked to, who we surveyed. In terms of job titles, you see a lot of subject matter experts, middle managers, and executives in the IT world, transatlantic view across the United States and Europe. Um, Lots of functional groups. The big ones are NetOps teams, IT ops teams, and the IT executive suite, but also project management and network engineering are well represented. Companies from mid-sized to very large, including 50,000 or more employees. And then there's more than a dozen industries. They're all enterprise for the most part. I avoid telcos, mobile operators, cloud providers, IT services providers, because I really want to survey people who are operating like enterprise style networks, data center, campus, wide area, and increasingly cloud. So you see a lot of people from the manufacturing sector, financial services, retail, healthcare, etc. Um, so the first thing we want to get out of the way in this presentation is what the heck is network observability? It's something you might know when you hear it, see it. Can you describe it? So I said I originally did some research on the topic of network observability in 2022. Um, I asked IT pros then, and I asked them again for this new version of the research. What what terms do you prefer to use to describe the tools you use to monitor, manage, and optimize your networks? And I gave them three options at that time in 2022, and then again in 2024: network monitoring, network performance management, and network observability. So in 2022, 20% of them told me that the network observability term was their preferred term. This time, this year, that number has more than doubled to 48%. So clearly, they've been marketed to, they've been talking to each other, they are becoming more familiar with network observability, and they're seeing some value in using that terminology to describe their solutions for management. Um, you also see on the chart here, we asked them this year, which of the following words and phrases do you most associate with the concept of network observability? And number one response, monitoring. So obviously there's a overlap of monitoring and network observability. That should be very clear to you based on what I've been talking about already. I'm remembering a conversation I had a couple of years ago with somebody on this very topic, and he was a network engineer, architect at a very large enterprise, and he said something to the effect of, I think of monitoring as a superset and network observability as a subset of tools. The network observability is something that's more actionable, more insightful. We'll get into that in a moment, but because I've had similar conversations this time with people on the topic as well. But so yeah, monitoring is clearly like a foundational component of whatever you're talking about when you're talking about network observability. What is monitoring? It's like pulling data from the network and analyzing it, presenting it in different ways so that people can understand what the data means. So yeah, monitoring obviously is something that comes to mind because they know that to some extent, network observability represents like a rebranding and or evolution of the tools that they have traditionally thought of as network monitoring and network performance management tools. Second, network data. Data is something that comes up a lot when I talk to people about network observability. It's about data. Like people are building out data lakes for their network data. They are very interested in improving how they collect data and analyze data, whether they're using commercial tools or open source tools, whatever. Data is becoming more like like a focus, like data quality, data scalability, um, and data diversity. And I'll get into that more in a second. And then data visualization. It's not just the collection of the data, it's how the tool presents it to you so that you can understand what's happening. So I think that network observability is about lots of data, lots of diversity of data, and being able to visualize it in a way that brings meaning to it. Now, you also see security here. Security is sort of, I would say almost like a red herring here because I'm asking these people about monitoring, troubleshooting, optimizing their networks. I'm not really asking them about how they do like network detection and response and things like that. But obviously, like security has a role to play. A lot of network observability vendors who do like traffic analysis offer some security capability in terms of network detection and or network detection and response. Um, so it's relevant, but it's not something that I'm going to concentrate on in this research. I knew that they were going to select it often just because security is always top of mind for network operations teams, even if it's not their core responsibility. And then number 5 here, actionable insights. It's not just about presenting data so that you can do the work of figuring out what it means. It's presenting that data to you and analyzing perhaps that data to present you with insights that help you take action as quickly as possible. Everything underneath that, I think, kind of could even be thought of as relating to how you bring actionable insights to the surface for the operations team, like change and config visibility. If you can correlate change with performance metrics, that's insight right there. Predictions, like predictive analytics, uh, artificial intelligence is obviously like a foundation that people are building upon to deliver actionable insights in a lot of different ways. I'm sure if you do any sort of network management, you have vendors telling you that they're using AI and machine learning to automate, streamline, optimize the way that they present information to you and give you things like automated root cause analysis and anomaly detection and intelligent alerting and all kinds of stuff. It's all kind of plays into that. But there's also some business related stuff here too, like user experience. Like it's important to the business, the people using your network are having good experience, and how does the network's performance impact the business? So business impacts. It's also a factor here. But anyway, I use that, and then I also talk to a lot of people one-on-one. So here's some quotes from your peers and monitoring tool architect from a Fortune 500 media company that's probably produced a TV show or movie that you've watched in the last couple weeks. Um, Network observability is a more holistic approach, he said. Where are where you are collecting a lot more data and finding patterns of anomalous behavior, it's more proactive, where you try to detect issues ahead of time. So having actionable insights even before something goes wrong. An infrastructure manager at a Fortune 500 energy utility company, someone who probably keeps the lights on in a lot of your homes, especially depending on what part of the country you live in. Says network observability refers to your awareness and ability to have eyes on the network and how it's actually performing, functioning, and being utilized. And that being utilized piece kind of echoes the security response that you saw on the previous slide. Like, actually, any of these answers could apply to security as well as performance and network experience. But these people are definitely all about like performance management. And then a network management tool architect at a $30 billion bank. That's 30 billion in revenue, not holdings. Um, Network observability means having the holistic view of the network, being able to see all your endpoints and nodes and what's going on with them. So all these people are telling me that they want like end-to-end insight, visibility, knowledge of what's happening on that network. They don't just want to wait for alerts to come, they want to know the state of their network. So here's a working definition. The first paragraph is the short definition. You have the second paragraph. It's a long definition. A network observability solution collects and visualizes large and insights management of availability, performance, experience, capacity, and security, depending on what tools you're using. Most tools that call themselves network observability would use the first four as use cases, and then others that would add the security use case. All right, so some examples of what you should look for. We talked about data. Network data is a foundation of network observability. It's kind of an obvious thing to say, but it's the truth. So at the top of this chart, you see 94% of the people we surveyed told us that they collect more network data than ever before. Like right now, their tools, their network observability tools or network monitoring tools, whatever they want to call them, they're collecting more data than ever before. So the volumes of total data collected and analyzed is growing, and it's not ever shrinking. It's always growing. Then the diversity of that data is increasing as well. You see, have any of the following types of network data become more important or less important to the management and monitoring of your network over the last 3 years? More often than not, they're telling us that all of these types of data are becoming more important. Some of them are more universally more important than others, but all of them are becoming more important. From the left, where you see cloud provider VPC flow logs, which is one of the newer types of data that network operations teams are worried about, to all the way to the right, topology data, DNS logs, not as intense an increase in importance as the stuff on the left, but still, more often than not, it's becoming more important rather than less important. We're staying the same. But yeah, VPC flow logs, very important, but also the staples, metrics via, device metrics via SNMP, MIBs, or APIs, or streaming telemetry, if you got that. Flow records like NetFlow, IPFix, SFlow, whatever. The traditional network flow records, not the VPC flow logs. Config information. You've been looking at config information forever to troubleshoot stuff. It's becoming even more important. Routing information like BGP data becoming more important. Logs. You see synthetic network traffic. That's become more important in recent years. There are more tools available than there used to be. Packets, more important than ever. So you need a pretty broad set of capabilities to collect all this data and analyze it in a meaningful way. We asked them, when you're evaluating network observability tools, which we defined for them obviously in the survey and said, whatever you use to monitor, troubleshoot, optimize your networks, let's just call it network observability for the rest of the survey. So that's what they were thinking in their head, like, yes, I know what tools you're talking about. When evaluating network observability solutions, shorthand for whatever you're using to monitor your networks, which of the following capabilities is most important to you? Data searchability. So we get back to that data thing. Now, not only do they want to collect that data and collect a lot of data and a lot of different types of data, they also want to be able to search it. Like, let me dive into it. Let me find the data that's important to me. Give me filters and tagging and things like that so that I can like correlate stuff as I search. User experience reporting and insights. So this is another thing that I think is driving change in network observability is this recognition that they want to not just manage performance in the network, but the experience of people using it, the individual experience of people using it, in fact. Traffic analysis, that's been important forever. Dashboards and reports, a lot of times in one-on-one conversations, that's the first thing they want. And alert and alarm management, a lot of times that's the second thing they want, like anecdotally speaking. But yeah, they're definitely all top of the list here. Those are the big ones. And you also see change detection is also pretty top of mind. And then the other stuff is secondary. But like if you're talking about individual use cases, like application context can become really important. Automated interactive maps kind of says, hey, wait, I thought that data visualization is really important. They don't care that much about automated interactive maps. That's at the bottom of the list. Well, yeah, that's true, but they do really care about dashboards and reports and data searchability, and that, you know, those also represent visualization. So there's a lot of different opinions on what is kind of visualization is important in a network observability tool, and it's going to depend on like who is using the tool. Like some people want dashboards and reports because that's how they solve problems. Other people want maps because they're trying to triage stuff, and a map shows them how to figure out how to triage it. So it really depends. And keep in mind, like people in this survey tended to be um, either engineers, architects, or up. Not a lot of like tier one admins and a knock. All right, so essential features and capabilities. Um, on the left, you see we asked them like, how important is it for you to have network observability tools that can do this? And you see 71% said it's very important to have end-to-end insights across multiple network domains. And this is another thing that I think is driving the concept of network observability is networks are kind of hybridizing and balkanizing, and there isn't a need to go from like troubleshooting like Wi-Fi and troubleshooting WAN and troubleshooting data center and troubleshooting end-to-end service. Um, and so they really want tools that can say, hey, like we can find the needle in the haystack across your network. It's this change here or this failure there. You may be feeling it at this other end of the network service that you deliver, but it's here where the problem is. So end-to-end insights across multiple network domains is really important. 66% said it's very important to have multi-vendor support because no one has a single vendor network. No matter how dominant the market leader might be in areas of the network, like I never talked to anyone that's got a single vendor. Like, yes, we have Cisco here, we got Juniper there, we've got Palo Alto here for our firewalls, we've got F5 load balancers that need to be monitored. Um, and then we have 2 or 3 different SD-WAN vendors, which, believe it or not, is very common. So you need a tool that can monitor across vendors. And then 60% said it's very important to be able to observe the individual network experience of people, not just like, okay, I think I know how people are experiencing my network, but how are these people experiencing the network? A few years ago, when everyone was working from home, I started asking network operations people, how are you monitoring the network experience of all these people that are working remotely? 90% of your people are working from home. What are you doing? Oh, we monitor the VPN concentrator. That's, that really solved things for us. Did it? I don't think so. Um, because then you start talking to people on the front line, they're taking support calls and being able to tell them, well, a VPN concentrator is fine, so you should be having a good experience is not going to be satisfactory. Like I talked to one network engineer during the pandemic who's talking about how she felt like she'd gone back to her first days out of college in a IT support group because she was working for a hospital operator and um, all of her doctors are doing telehealth for the first time from home. And they would call her and say, "Hi, I can't talk to my patients. The video's not working, or it's like keeps crashing." And what's she going to tell them? Oh, her VPN concentrator's fine, so yeah, you're good. No, you need to start getting tools that can report on the individual network experience. Like you don't necessarily, you might not be able to afford to like instrument every user's endpoint so that you can like directly manage their experience, but at least you can set up some monitoring of the wide area network, the internet, things like in different areas, so you can understand how different domains are impacting experience. Like, oh yeah, everyone in the Chicago metropolitan area on the south side is having an issue with this ISP right now, so that's probably something I need to escalate to my provider, things like that. And then finally, on the left, 59% told us that it's very important now to be able to observe unmanaged networks, which kind of gets into what I was just talking about with individual network experience. Your network 15 years ago was easily monitored because you own the data center, you own the access networks like the campus, the remote sites, you owned all that. And then the WAN that was connecting everything was a managed WAN service with an SLA, and you weren't using the cloud yet. So you could directly monitor and manage everything, but then your company started using the public cloud where you didn't have administrative control, and your ability to extract meaningful network telemetry with your existing tools was challenged. Maybe you've solved most of that by now. Some vendors were slower than others to get there. And then you started using the internet for WAN connectivity as you adopted SD-WAN, and that didn't come with an SLA. And you thought maybe your SD-WAN vendor would be able to optimize the internet to the extent that it wasn't a big issue. But then you realize, well, the SD-WAN vendor is really good at monitoring the tunnels and the overlay, but doesn't really provide a lot of insight into the internet performance all the time. And so I really need to get some visibility into that. And how am I going to do that? And maybe I start using some synthetic network monitoring tools. I don't know. There's a lot of options, but clearly, like you don't have direct administrative control over your entire enterprise network anymore because the internet is increasingly the backbone. The cloud is increasingly your data center environment, and you got a lot of people working from home using their own Wi-Fi and their own ISP, and you don't have any control over that. So got to adjust your tooling. We also asked them what are your essential alert management features and your essential troubleshooting features, and you see event correlation, like incidents versus alerts. So much noise coming out of tools. Can we roll up 20 alerts into one incident and through some sort of correlation, and then I can not have as many alerts that I need to deal with and as many tickets generated by alerts. Automated notifications and escalations. Being able to get the notifications to the right people, the right experts, something they're looking to get out of their tools. Triggered runbooks and automated workflows is becoming increasingly important. A lot of people will spend like a year after buying a new tool, writing all these scripts and attaching them to their monitoring tool in a way that alerts will trigger a runbook or something. But increasingly, you want that runbook creation maybe like integrated into your monitoring tool in some way. Like, it'd be great if like I had a workflow in my alert management system that could directly create like a runbook or an automated workflow um, in the alert management system, so that if this known condition happens, I can just like have it fixed automatically instead of having to worry about it and figure it out later. Essential troubleshooting features. So reports on network changes. We kind of talked about how change detection was a secondary thing that people were looking for and expecting from network observability. Anomaly detection, like tell me what's different that hasn't happened before and let me analyze it. AI-enabled root cause analysis. So people are really starting to see AI-enabled capabilities as like table stakes. That's the number 3 thing we're looking for here is like an AI capability that can do some root cause analysis. And then something that doesn't require AI at all, multiple metrics overlaid for time series analysis. Show me device metrics, show me bandwidth utilization, show me config changes all on one graph. And so I can sort of draw some lines between them, understand what's happening. That's very basic and valuable. Speaking of AI-enabled root cause analysis, 59% of the people that we surveyed said it's now very important for their network observability solutions to have AI-driven features. Only 42% said they trust the features they have from their vendors today, but 59% is very important to have them. So there is a little bit of a trust gap there. It needs to be closed through transparency and strong communication between vendors and customers so that customers understand how their vendors are using AI, what lessons they learn over time, um, show their work. Like here, click through here if you want to look at the data that is the basis of our decision. That our AI generated insight. You can verify it if you want. You can verify it whenever you want. What kinds of benefits are they expecting from AI-driven network observability? These are the big ones. Operational efficiency, obviously, like there's some degree of automation happening. When AI is like driving insights to you, like you can spend less time on like trying to piece things together and you can just act. You maybe want to verify and then act. but still, at least you have something to verify, like, oh, is this right? It is right. Okay, I'm going to do what it says. And 54% say it's going to enable proactive problem prevention, so less downtime, less service degradation because we're just better at detecting things before it impacts the business. And then network optimization, like it's making recommendations to adjust quality of service or add bandwidth here, or this product's end of life, and maybe you should replace it because replacing it will improve performance by this amount, things like that. Example of AI features. In the previous chart, I was showing you what are the essential alert management capabilities that you look for. Well, 20% answered that question by saying it's essential to have alerts that offer recommended actions. So some sort of AI machine learning capability that can say, based on our understanding of the network, we are embedding this recommended action in this alert to say, if you try this, it might resolve the issue. That is increasingly important. And that's a good example of how AI can drive operational efficiency, if not the other two on that list above. So how are people doing with network observability, or monitoring or performance management, if they're still thinking in those terms, in which more than half of people, 52%, preferred term other than network observability to describe their tools. But how are you doing with those tools, whatever you want to call them? So overall satisfaction is soft, not terrible, but soft. Only 43% said that they would describe their overall experience with these tools as completely successful. So most of them see room for improvement. But only about 5 or 6% said that they were actually failing. Like most of them were partial success. 59 incumbent network observability or network monitoring or network performance management tool within the next 2 years. So that suggests that they see a need to make some improvements or some changes to optimize their tool set for their operations. Tool sprawl is prevalent. 57% told us they use 3 or more tools to monitor, troubleshoot, and optimize their networks. And nearly everyone that had more than one tool told us that they would like to consolidate for a variety of reasons. And then finally, alert noise is rampant. 55% of alerts are not actionable. That means 55% of the alerts coming out of these tools in the average enterprise, that's the mean response, are not indicative of something that needs to be resolved or addressed or fixed. It's just noise. It's something that's triggered because the tool sees something that scope of what is acceptable or normal and is telling you about it, and you're like, nope, that's not something I need to deal with. It's not affecting the business. It's like, you know, if another device goes down, maybe that alert will be relevant, but right now it's not, it's not impacting applications, it's not impacting user experience. I can ignore it. Maybe it doesn't even need to be fixed at all. So lots of noise needs to be addressed. We asked people, what are your biggest complaints about the tools you're currently using? The number one response, limited scope. I can't monitor everything I need to monitor. My tool doesn't really do well in the cloud. Really good example is, I've adopted Secure Access Service Edge, which has introduced all these cloud-based security proxies that my WAN traffic goes through. My users going to the cloud go through the SASE Secure Access Service Edge proxies, and it gets encrypted there before it goes onto the cloud. And once it gets encrypted, I don't know what's happening with it. And my SASE provider doesn't really tell me what's happening with it. And my monitoring tools can't pull any data from there. I can't monitor everything I need to monitor. Too expensive. I'm not surprised people are complaining about that, especially if they're using 3 or 4 or 5 tools, it gets even more expensive. Some vendors are more expensive than others. It's a constant battle to find the right price for what you want to be able to do with your tools. Lack of customization. This is especially important if You have like lots of different users with different skill levels and different responsibilities. Um, Difficult to implement and maintain. It's something we try to evaluate all the time when we're doing vendor comparison studies. Like how hard is it for you to implement and maintain these tools? There's a lot of variability there. Um, Even if you consume something as a SaaS tool, there can still be some difficulty in getting something up and running on your network to the way that you're satisfied with it. And then, insufficient scalability, common issue, poor data quality, and then too noisy, alert fatigue. Um, you may have different opinions on this. Maybe you have a vendor where customer support is your biggest complaint, and you're seeing, oh, only 8.5% of people name that as their biggest issue, and it's my biggest issue. Maybe I should switch vendors because I'd really like to work with a vendor that has a better customer support organization. But then you have to worry about whether they can do all the other things right, like do they have the scope you want? Diving into the scope limitation in a little more detail, 85% of people in the survey told us that their tools struggle to collect data from certain domains on the network. The biggest one was networks used by remote workers, and then that was followed by the public cloud, software-defined WAN, internet connectivity, so the underlay that the SD-WAN is running over or forming tunnels over, and then secure access service edge. I just talked about those SASE proxies that people complain to me about. You see on the right, network engineer with a billion-dollar financial technology company saying many network vendors lack APIs, have totally crap APIs, so have to go through a lot of effort to build custom tooling to get structured data from every device in the format that I want. Um, you would think that your tool vendors would be able to figure that out, but there's always like something new coming out from your networking vendors that may not be able to play nice with all your tool vendors. And there's like a gap in time where you're able to monitor it correctly. This is especially an issue if you're not using a vendor. If you're using like an open source tool, then you got a lot of work ahead of you. Network management tool architect with a Fortune 500 retailer saying to me, trying to onboard data that isn't supported out of the box is too much work. Um, some vendors will try to differentiate themselves by having plugins that are really adaptable and community generated, um, or sort of decoupling the plugins from the overlying architecture of their tool so that it's easier to make adjustments without having to update the entire tool. Um, there's lots of different ways that you can address this issue, but here's a couple examples of people that are really struggling with it for whatever reason. And then more on the lack of customization that we referenced earlier in a couple charts ago. Network engineer with that billion-dollar financial technology company. I'm not content with the tools that we get off the shelf. So he's going open source. That's why we go custom with Prometheus and other open source tools. You can customize them and make them as smart as you want to. I've never been limited by them, but it's a lot of work. Yes, it's going to be a lot of work if you go open source. You got the people who know how to do it. You can have a lot of success. Those people leave, you're going to have to find someone else to support it and maintain it and advance it. But it is an option. But anyway, so customization can be, very nice when you have open source, but it can be a lot of work. Network management tool architect of the Fortune 500 retailer says one of the main problems with his vendor provided tools is the customization of dashboards, and a lot of things are hard coded in the dashboards from his tool vendor. If you want to add labels for filtration, other customizations, it doesn't work. It doesn't allow you to customize its dashboards and reports enough for his liking. Kind of on the same theme here, this monitoring tool architect, the Fortune 500 media company, says that biggest thing for him is the ability for users to customize how they want to see the data. I want to see more flexibility in visualization engines. As a system architect, I can come up with multiple use cases and build them into the tool, but I can't predict everything that users will need. That is huge, right? So this guy, he's really good with sort of delivering tools and like supporting anticipated use cases, but he can't guarantee he's going to anticipate all the use cases that his users, his NetOps people are going to need. So tools need customization features to personalize user experience for operations personnel. Um, so not just customization that can be done by the person that is like the administrative lead for the tool that you adopt, but also customization that is sort of friendly to the masses, the people who have, that aren't like huge script heads, they don't know their way around Python that well. They don't know the APIs of the tool vendor that well, but they want to customize how they look at the tool, use the tool. So that's something to keep in mind. So final thoughts. Hopefully this isn't coming up too quickly for you. You feel like you've gotten a lot of information so far. Hopefully I'm not jumping to the end too quickly for you. Network observability is a mainstream concept. It's what people are starting to prefer to describe their tools for monitoring, troubleshooting, and optimizing their networks. And I would argue that you should let that marketing terminology that you might be cynical about, let it drive you to demand more from your vendors, to talk to them about how you want to collect more data at scale without having to pay like top dollar. And you want more data diversity. Can you collect this data? Can you analyze it? Can combine it with this other data that you've always collected? Are you collecting VPC flow logs from AWS yet? I'd love to see that integrated into how you present flow data, for, NetFlow and whatnot. Actionable insights across different networks. Can you present me with insights, not just raw data that I have to crunch and analyze and understand, but that can you present reports and dashboards and visualizations that tell a story? And can you do that across different types of networks, not just, my Wi-Fi network and not just my campus switching, but also, can you tie it to the data center and the WAN and the cloud and, not just the WAN underlay, but the overlay, the SD-WAN, the SASE proxies. Can you partner with my SASE vendor so they will send you telemetry and contextualize that with the rest of what's happening on my network? And then demand AI-enabled analytics and automation. A lot of people think AI is BS or overblown, but I'm seeing value, and most of the people in the survey see the potential of applying AI to network data to workflows to do things like anomaly detection and analysis, intelligent alerting, root cause analysis, suggested or automated remediation. The list goes on. It's use this embrace of the term network observability to say, you're a network observability vendor now? All right, do better. And there's lots of other things to think about around this topic. I couldn't cover everything in this webinar because it is like more than 60 pages of data analysis in that report. So if you download that report, you're going to find other things like the future of streaming network telemetry. Is it going to replace SNMP? Is it ever going to be easy to adopt? And why would I want it? Look at more factors that drive tool replacement. I noted that most of the people in the survey think they're going to replace a tool in a couple years. Like, why is that happening? And should you be part of the movement? The role of open source tools, kind of alluded to some of that with one of the people I interviewed talking about why he uses Prometheus as a big monitoring tool, observability tool in his network management stack. But we did ask about, are you using open source and why? And then impacts of tool sprawl. We alluded to that, but we really dug into like what happens with that tool sprawl. What are you doing to mitigate it? And then managing individual network experiences. We talked about that quite a bit. We dug into that a bit more in the research, like how people doing that. So there's the link to download the report from our website at EMA, but you can also get it from a few of the sponsors. Several of them purchased distribution rights to the report as part of their sponsorship. So you could go to their website too if you want to get it for free, because we will charge you unless you're a subscriber to EMA. And it's now available, published last week. But with that, I'm going to turn it over to Raleigh for some Q&A. So thanks for your time.
Thanks, Shamus. Let's go ahead and jump into the questions. And if you have any, feel free to use the Q&A functionality to log them now. Shamus, the first question is your research pointing to single vendor solutions, one tool that collects and analyzes all network data and fulfills all use cases?
I don't think so. I do see people wanting to use like smaller tool sets to have um, less sprawl. Like I said, most of the conversations I have, people are using like 3 or 4 vendors for network observability. And the data here shows that too. But my research points to like a single vendor as an ideal state, but not necessarily a real goal. Um, there's the at least not in the near future. Like I don't like there's some vendors that have like tools that can do lots of like can fulfill different use cases, and they have like a suite, and they can maybe tackle almost everything you need, but maybe you don't like all the tools that they offer. Um, there are tools that specialize in very specific aspects of observability, and they'll go deep in certain areas, but they might not go as deep as you want in other areas. And so the real goal is to have consolidation and integration. Like, yes, maybe you can have fewer tools than you're using today, but the tools that you do have that you don't want to get rid of, they shouldn't be siloed. There are multiple ways that you could and should integrate them around reporting, alerting, diagnostics. Maybe you can stream data to a central event management tool, and that can like streamline some of your triage and stuff. Or perhaps you have one tool vendor that has a powerful AI ops capability that can consume data from your other tools and give you some deep analytics and diagnostics. Whatever the case, don't let your tools exist as silos. Even if they're multi-vendor, like look for ways to connect them. Ask your vendors if they're going to partner. If like, oh, I see you don't really do much with packets. Do you partner with a vendor that does? You're not really doing much with synthetics. Do you partner with a vendor that does? And how can you help me like consolidate operations so that I don't have to go to a different vendor to get that insight? So yeah, I don't think you'll ever get to a single vendor solution, but um, you can get to an integrated solution where the the silos between vendors don't necessarily cause any trouble.
Good insights. Thanks, Shamus. Can you also share some insights into what makes people switch tool vendors?
I published an article in Network World yesterday that kind of dives into this quite a bit. So if you go to their website, you'll find it there. Um, but one of the insights from our data that sort of screamed out to me why people are looking at new tools or dumping vendors. People who told us that they have problems collecting data from secure access service edge, public internet, public cloud, and containers were more likely to have strong interest in a strong likelihood in replacing tools. That tells me that like they've got tools that really haven't evolved to the hybrid network reality that we have today, where like there's a lot of public internet, there's a lot of public cloud, and there's a lot of overlays on the WAN, and there's a lot of cloud native technology like containers and Kubernetes. And my existing network observability tools aren't really doing as good a job with all that as I thought that they could. And so I am open to new vendors. Um, I think like when I first became a network management analyst, I immediately started asking every vendor I talked to, what are you doing to provide visibility into the public cloud? And um, some of them had an answer, and others said, our customers aren't asking for that. Um, I would argue that they should have anticipated that they would ask for it eventually. And eventually, all of them did. And some vendors were far behind. And when that happens, that's when people start thinking about switching tools and switching vendors because their vendor isn't mature enough yet to have adequate visibility into something like the public cloud. Another thing that I saw that sort of correlated with interest in tool replacement was AI. I alluded to it earlier. I think it was 59% of people in the survey told us that it's very important to have AI-driven insights, AI-driven analytics uh, from network observability vendors. those people were the most likely or more likely than people who said it wasn't that important for AI to be in their tools. So those people, the ones that are like, hey, I want AI from my network observability vendors, those people are like also the ones that were most likely to say, I think I'm going to replace my tool in 2 years, within 2 years, because maybe they're seeing a vendor out there that's doing really cool stuff with AI and they want it. And it's worth the pain and suffering associated with ripping out a tool and replacing it with another one. I had a conversation with someone earlier in 2024. I just asked them, like, would you ever switch tools because you're managing a network for 50,000 people, and wouldn't it be painful to replace a tool? And he was like, hell no, I've got no loyalty to vendors. I will replace a tool in a second if I think I can find one that does something better. Um, the, the project may become painful in the future, and he'll have a different answer for me today. But back then, he was like, hell no, I got no tool vendor loyalty. Which is why tool vendors are always trying to make their tools more sticky by making them more useful. So, but anyway, AI laggards, I think, are going to see some uh, uh, churn in customers who are like, hey, AI is starting to really do cool stuff. We want AI-driven capabilities and insights, but you're not doing anything yet because your customers didn't ask for them in time. Maybe you should have anticipated that.
Thanks, Shamus. Let's take one final question. It is, how are the organizations in your research trying to reduce alert noise?
Most people I talk to tell me that the tools that they have really good features for reducing noise, and yet um, everyone has too much noise. Why is that? I think it's because the knobs and buttons that vendors offer for noise mitigation in alerts and alarms and so forth aren't always easy to use. And some people told me that. You need to take the time to tune alerts. It can take like 6 months to get them to the point where they're no longer kicking out things that perplex you or confuse you. Those knobs, those buttons are not always easy to use. And even after you master those knobs and buttons, it still can be time consuming to do all the work of tuning them. So it can take a long time. Especially if you don't have the time to devote to it and you don't have the skills in-house to really scale up the effort to mitigate those. And I think that's one of the reasons why you see so much interest in AI-driven capabilities, because they see like, oh, well, AI and machine learning can do a lot of event correlation. That's what some of the first like AI ops specialists did, was like they just took alerts and alarms from like 20 different tools and tried to correlate stuff. Didn't really do any analytics underneath that to tell you how to do root cause analysis and remediation, but they could point you where to go, right? So I think people want that sort of capability in the tools that they use for network alerting. I think that's a potential way to go, but if you do have the skills in-house and the time, like any tool can become less noisy if you put the time in. It's just the question of whether that vendor has made it really easy for you to do it. And they may just mitigate the entire exercise by like delivering an AI-driven alerting solution to you at some point so that you no longer have to play with all those knobs and buttons to get to where you want it to be.
Thanks, Shamus. We actually have one more question come in. I don't see time and complexity of convergence as an issue for change. Do you hear this as a common diversion to change or upgrade?
Time and complexity is, could you repeat that question, Raleigh?
Sure, no problem. This attendee said, I don't see time and complexity of convergence as an issue for change. Do you hear this as a common diversion to change or upgrade?
Time and complexity is an issue for convergence. I'm not really clear on what the questioner is asking. Like, change of tool, change of config. Um, is there any? possible clarification the questioner could offer around what they're actually asking me about?
I don't see any more clarification, so I will send this to you offline.
Okay.
We do try to get to all the questions, so we'll see if we can get any more clarity on that. In the meantime, I'd like to go ahead and thank everyone for taking time out of your schedule to join us. As I mentioned, there will be a follow-up email with resources from today's event, so I hope you will check that email out. And I hope we will see you at a future EMA research webinar. Thank you again for joining us, and enjoy the rest of your day.